Arlo here. So this podcast episode was a little bit hard to put together because Oksana and I wanted to tie the diving video back to the first video we put up, and I realized that a lot of the story that we use at the beginning doesn't have any kind of cover footage that I could use to hide all the little edits and the audio sync problems that I get into. After thinking about it for a while, the best I could come up with was to make a little slideshow to go over the top of it. And it's not the best thing in the world, but at least it gives you something to look at and allows me to show some of the pictures that I couldn't fit in anywhere else anyway. Anyway, here it goes. Hope you enjoy. After we were done with the Captain's Corner dives, we thought, that was okay. It wasn't bad. We had a few more days in Key West and we were deciding, do we want to do any more dives? Do we want to go with Captain's Corner again? At one point, we decided to stop by this dive shop called Dive Key West to pick up a mesh bag. We were talking to this very personable guy behind the counter. We told him that we were a little disappointed with our other dives. He told us about the dives they offered. They were quite a bit more expensive, but he was so friendly and the dives sound so cool, we decided, you know what, why don't we give these guys a try?
We totally got sucked into a really awesome diving company. They were fun, they were friendly, and they made your dive experience absolutely fantastic.
So our first dive was at West Sambo Reef. As soon as we got in the water, we knew it was going to be a much better dive. The water was more clear, colors were better, everything about it was better. As we were descending, I saw two barracuda swim by, and I tried to fumble with the camera to get it going really quick, and by the time I got it pointed in their direction, they were just disappearing into the gloom. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And I had just hit record when they started to turn back. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm gonna get a picture of them. And they get closer and closer. And I have enough time to move my hands back and curl my fingers around because, I've heard they've got pretty big teeth. And then suddenly it just takes off right towards the camera. And I was like, holy crap. It happened so quick I didn't even realize what was going on. But when I looked back at the same video later, I realized that another fish had swam right in front of the camera and I almost got a barracuda strike on film there.
There are so many things to see on the dives. There's never enough time to see it all. However, there are a lot of little memorable things that I saw on this particular dive. We got to see a hogfish. That fish is so ugly. It's just hilarious how ugly that thing is. But we got to approach really close and it was totally fascinated by eating whatever it was picking off the coral wall, and they're just really, really strange looking creatures. The parrotfish are really cool. They have a little beak that looks like a parrot beak, and I think that's why they're called parrotfish. And they approach the coral and they will actually pick on the coral or whatever they eat off the coral. The particular one that I got to see is a midnight parrotfish. They're very awkward, but at the same time very pretty, and I got to see one, so I feel quite cool about that.
Halfway through the dive, I handed the camera off to Oksana and I pointed to her and I started doing our motion for start filming. I don't think she saw the turtle at first.
It was a perfect surprise. The turtle allowed us to get really close, and we were able to follow it for quite a while. It really swam very casual and slow. The turtle wasn't bothered by us at all.
And while Oksana was following along behind it, filming it, I wasn't going to touch it, but I wanted to see how close I could get. And at one point, I had my nose maybe a foot away from his nose, and he looked over at me, and I thought for sure it would be on film. I looked at it later, and the camera was so tight on the turtle, you didn't even get to see that part.
I, of course, totally lost track of the depths and ended up, unfortunately, surfacing. However, we were in the shallows, so it wasn't a big deal.
And he eventually surfaced for some air.
And as soon as it was done, it took off. I'm not kidding. Just one swing of its flippers and it was gone.
We were in the water for almost an hour. It was a really good dive for us. When we pulled ourselves up onto the boat after the first dive, we realized we were the last ones out of the water, which for Oksana and I was kind of like score, because in Australia we were always the first out. For our second dive, we were still at West Sambo. It wasn't quite as good as the first dive, just because we didn't get to see quite as many cool things.
We saw squirrelfish. They're so cautious of you, and every time you approach, they kind of turn their bodies and they look at you with this big, huge eye.
We came across another lobster sitting under a shelf in the shallows. And at one point we happened across a small barracuda. It almost looked like he was sunning himself in the shallows. He was just kind of hovering there in the sunlight, completely unperturbed by us. We got fairly close and circled around him. We came across what was probably a cleaning station, because as we approached, some of the fish opened their mouth really wide. Normally, I guess the little shrimp or something will come in and clean out the parasites, but we didn't get to see the actual process. We just saw some fish looking like they were yawning.
We came across a little Christmas tree worm. They're this little spiral, cone-shaped, super colorful shell. I never could imagine that I would call a little worm cute, but they're adorable.
At the very end of the dive, we got back out again. We were under for very close to an hour, and again, we were the last people out of the water. The dive master kind of took our gauges and took a look at them, but when he saw that we still had like 1,000 PSI left, he's just like, huh, okay. You know, we didn't think much about it. We just kind of thought maximizing our time underwater was cool.